Welcome to the Strong Talk podcast. I am Kalle Beck, joined by 80 kilo, 175-pound Arnold Strongman champion, fresh off the win, Cody Abell. Goes by Strongest Tattooer on Instagram if you follow me. Interesting. It's fun to talk to you because I feel like you were kind of coming into it as I was getting out. So,
Yeah.
been following you for it's like close to 10 years now you've been competing in the sport.
Yeah, that just dawned on me like Sunday night. We're like getting near 10 years in strongman.
It's a long time in strongman.
Yeah.
It's like 50 real years, I feel.
Yes, I agree.
So I want to go over the Arnold, well, like, podcasts they always people want to hear and they lay it, but let's just go over the Arnold first. I have a feeling, just kind of vicariously, following you and talking to you over the years, that this was your goal kind of from day one. Uh,
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
am I right or
Yeah, y yes and no. For so I got into strongman specifically to compete. Yeah, well, it looked fun, but I got into it because it looked fun to compete in. And that was off the back of me training CrossFit for a couple of years. And because I was following you for so long, I was like, I want to switch to strongman and I want to get to the Arnold. And things evolved when I got to the Arnold, and my first Arnold, it didn't go that great from a placement performance perspective, but I took it on the chin because I had two zeros in 2019, and I just had this very strong, frankly, entitlement that I was like, I can beat these guys. Like I can win this contest, and I don't need to just ugh, I I can do more than just be here. But for me, the Arnold has been the thing that was brought me to this, created a goalpost in the sport, I should say.
yeah, I would. That's what I meant. Like, once you were serious and you're like, I think I could do this. It's not why
Yeah.
you got into strongman to do the Arnold, but it's like that's like you look at like what you want to accomplish. Because
Yeah.
I could look back as competing myself. You have these things like I want to win nationals. I want to do that. Like people get these things in their head once they're like you get that moment where you're like, this is possible. Whether it
Yes.
is or isn't, I think every athlete gets that moment. But so how this is what your fourth Arnold?
Fifth.
Okay. I was gonna
Yeah.
guess. I knew it was either four or five.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of them. Are they all consecutive?
No, so I did 2019 and then um 22, 23, 24, 25. So the last four have been consecutive, but my first
Sure.
one there was a bit of a break.
Yeah. And what have you seen from like 2019 to now? Because I know Strongman Corporation's under, new ownership with James Deffenbaugh. Was it pretty similar? Like, is the vibe kind of still the same or?
I would say that ironically, James has been a strong presence within Strong Court for several years now. Um, and to me, this year felt a lot like in presentation, in vibe, and look, and whatnot, felt like 22. So in 22, we were in the Strongman arena with like the Rogue Arnold Classic, the big dudes and women. And the other years, it was more what you experienced a couple times where we were amongst the expo and whatnot. And this year, James and Strongman Corp did a really good job and effort creating that arena look and vibe, but within the expo itself and not with us with the big dudes and women or the pros. So this year in 22, to me, I felt the most similar and in a lot of ways felt the most, it had the Arnold prestige and like oh, I get to be at the Arnold. And it also had that feeling of like a parking lot show in a good way. So, and I think that for me, we could have the debate of, and it's been the debate in strongman since the Arnold Classic started of like, well, if you don't win Worlds, but you win the Arnold, or if you win the Arnold, or you know what I mean, whatever. But to me, like the Arnold having that like grassrooted strongman show feel with the prestige and honor and opportunity is like the winning combination. Whereas some of the bigger shows, Nationals, OSG, and some of the other ones, they sometimes you kind of feel like you're getting shuttled along in a factory, and a good portion of that is just the circumstance of the size of the shows. So it's not necessarily a failing on the promoter's part per se, but the Arnold has pretty consistently had this sort of grassroots feeling while also being prestigious. And to be clear, that there's been some years like that have been not as great as others. 23, I believe we were supposed to be in the Strongman Arena again, and then last minute we weren't, and it was not, wasn't the best setup, but we all persevered through and made it through. And we had a good time, and that was the year that they built the Ukrainian deadlift setup for the finals, and that was incredible. So it ebbs and flows, but I think James, stepping up, and we're entering his first year as owner, and the goal and what he tried to do this year is a good sign, and I think he's moving in the right direction. Obviously, you know, there was some logistical issues, and they had to make a lot of changes, and I can't speak to whether, what, how, or why that happened, but I do think they've got the right idea, and you give them notes on how and what could have been better, and then if you're not in a position to support, you just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I don't want to go into the details on what went wrong and stuff. That happens
No, yeah,
after every big show. It doesn't
yeah,
matter how good or bad it was. Um,
100%.
but I do know, knowing James and his is that he is open to feedback and listening, and that's more than you can say for most people in the sport.
Yep.
And with that, it'll continue to improve. And I was happy when he bought Strongman Corporation, just because it's like, oh, it's it's one of us. That's the way I see it.
Yep.
It's like an actual
Yeah.
person who's one of us is running it. Not saying that they weren't before or anything, just if it's going to pass on. I was like, this
Trusted
probably
hand.
best case scenario.
Yeah. James was in the trenches, as I would say. Like he did the amateur, the parking lot, garage, just classic strongman circuit, then went to nationals, won nationals, became a pro. Like he was in there doing the thing. And I do think he is trying to do what me and a lot of our friends probably talk about is creating an athlete centric experience at these shows, which then will be just frankly a better presentation to help push the sport.
Definitely. Uh, so what, like, you want to, let's run through the day. Like, you're going into it, and there's however many events. Like, run through the events and how they went for you.
Yeah.
Like,
So
honestly, it was a little hard for me to find score sheets and stuff this year. I looked a little bit. I didn't dig,
yeah,
but like,
yeah.
so just let so people can know, like, you're a world champion at this, in the lightweight class, this level. Like, what kind of stuff did you have to hit?
Yeah, so I can't talk about that without bringing up that, this was coming off the back of a pretty devastatingly not great OSG for me. Mixed, some of it was mental stuff, and then a portion of it was also I got injured, and so and I was a little dinged up going into OSG, and then like in basically over the course of events 2 and 4 just became fully injured. I had a massive strain in my pelvic ligament that was causing my pelvis to shift side to side essentially on certain movements. and I had tears in both adductors and my groin. So once OSG wrapped up, I got some imaging done, and my coach Flash was just like, "We're going to take things day by day and week by week." So luckily, the people I sought out for medical advice and imaging and all that stuff helped me a lot, and we determined it was a non-surgical injury, and I had a probably 6 to 8 week turnaround, which left me about 4 weeks of full-blown training. So we just took it week by week. I didn't clean a log or pick a sandbag off the floor for probably at least a month to 6 weeks. And we just did the most simple linear progressions. But leading into the Arnold, I didn't hit anything near competition weights until about 2 weeks out, at best, and focused more on just feeling good and turning the gym into an outlet, instead of this sort of self-imposed crucible or like room of self-loathing, which it happens. Like we all know, like when we're pushing really hard, that can be where your head goes. So what I made a point to do is leading into the Arnold was, one, make sure my body could hold up, and then two, like I just resigned myself to like, okay, we're going to go to the Arnold. We're not going to be at our absolute best, but we get to be at the Arnold with our team, with my coach, and with my best friends. And I just resigned and accepted that. And I took every day in the gym as like a blessing, essentially. But leading into the event, I was most nervous about log because due to my injury, I had to completely change how I clean and press the log. Anyone that knows me knows I'm pretty good and well known as a split jerker. Due to my injury, that sort of dynamic split position isn't ideal, and we didn't want to run the risk of doing anything that would agitate it. So we had to switch over to push press, push jerk only. So, um, which we ended up having better consistency with anyway leading into it. And I was able to hit basically like 92% of my lifetime 1RM. But morning of Saturday, day one, we had log, trap bar, yoke, and the sandbag medley. And leading into the log, even though training was going very good, I decided to play it very safe and open conservatively and approached it just like a powerlifting meet. And didn't plan on being able to hit a PR, but left myself room for the option. So I opened really low at 255 and then missed 270. With the structure that they ran that event, I was able to take a third attempt like in a powerlifting meet, and then I like circled around and I went up to Flash and I just kept my calm and cool, and he literally just looked at me and just said like he's like, you've got the strongest legs of anyone we know. Trust your legs. Legs, legs, legs. And I was just like, okay. Went out there, hit 270. Got real excited about it because it was on a new log. I've never used a Slater wooden log before. So I was happy to do that on a log I'd never really touched. And it didn't feel bad, but it just felt different. So closed that out. I was really happy with that, given my circumstance. Immediately went into just coming down a little bit, and we had the trap bar deadlift next, which for me historically, no, deadlifts just aren't really my best until about the last year or so. And the deadlift had actually been going phenomenal in training, the trap bar. So went into it and just went for one big set, and I got three at 700, which I was stoked about. Tried to go, I unstrapped, took a break, and then I went into for the fourth and just wasn't there. I think if I maybe would have held tension and went into it straight from the third, I could have got it, but 50-50. So walked off the field. My teammate and great friend Josh and Ross went. Flash told me how I placed on that event, which I normally don't, I don't like knowing that per se. I don't really, especially in a scenario like this. I didn't want to know points or anything, but he was like, "Hey, you got second on the deadlift at the Arnold," which that, regardless of end of the weekend placement, I was very happy about because deadlift is something I'm usually at the very bottom. So that was just like a nice personal PR. We started warming up for the yoke, and the only yoke they had in warm up was basically just in this corner, and we couldn't carry it. We could pick and hold. Um, it was loaded somewhere around 650, 675. And to be completely honest, we all picked it and held it and warmed up, and all of us, everyone I was warming up with from the 80 kilo, were like, "This feels like shit." So I just accepted, like, okay, this is going to be a really grinder yoke event, and you just got to be as tough as you possibly. You just got to be the toughest son of a bitch you can be, because it's just going to hurt. So I started watching. I don't usually watch, but I was waiting, so I was watching a little bit, and I saw the yoke was surprisingly burying people more than I was expecting, which actually made me even more scared because I'm a solid yoke runner, but I'm not the best. And some really talented yoke runners were getting buried and not even finished. So Flash looked at me and he just said, "All I want you to focus on is two 60-foot runs unbroken. That's it. Don't worry about just get it done." Went out there. Me and Josh walked out side by side, gave each other the fist bump, and we're just like, "Let's go." I think I probably had the smoothest 60-foot run at 700 I've ever had in my career. Maybe not the fastest, but it was definitely the smoothest. That we had those big, wide rogue yokes, and I actually thought they felt really good. And then as I brought it back on the back half, that last 20 or 30 feet, it really sank into me. And I noticed that I was passing a lot of people in my heat, and I had passed my best friend, Josh, the two-time champ coming into this year. And I just thought I have to finish this event. Like, so I had to repick it twice, and I got it through. And I had kind of a yell at the end, not so much for like like not so much for beating the guys in my heat, but more of like that event took a lot out of me and was like, for me, it was all willpower. Because I mean, I mean, I think you've even said yoke is like the one thing you stop doing after you stopped competing, and
Why would
those,
you?
yeah, I mean,
You masochist or what? Like,
right. I mean, I know you've had some bad like bad feeling yoke events, and it's brutal. So I just, more than knowing I won my heat, I was just like, that was all willpower. And then me and Josh went and got worked on by one of the chiropractors, and we both were just like, this contest feels exactly how we thought. Because we knew it was going to be bad on paper. I remember reading everything in its totality, and I was like, any one of these events by themselves is fine, but all of them, all four in one day, is pretty rough. So, uh, got worked on, got some sugar in me. Surprisingly, the show was not that. It wasn't that energy draining.
okay.
Uh, like I'm usually like a fiend on competition day. I'm just like eating, 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 and I just didn't really need that much. I mean, I was taking in like liquid carbs, but from like a energy glycogen standpoint, it didn't actually drain me that bad. Mentally and physically, I was feeling it, but from like a sort of an energy standpoint, it wasn't bad. For I don't know what that is exactly, but so um, and again, at this point, I don't know where I'm at. And I went into this contest accepting the reality that I could come in last, I could come in sixth and barely make the finals. Like anything could happen, good, bad, or otherwise. I definitely didn't think I could win. Like I specifically told somebody that. But I just had to so I didn't know where I was at. I didn't want to know points or placement at all, other than the second on the deadlift. So I start warming up for the bag medley a little bit. I wanted to do just enough to get warm, and that was it. I did a couple of Husafel bag picks and just kind of I can kind of intuit how like okay, I'm ready. So warmed up, took a seat, and I was anticipating going a lot sooner than I thought. And I'm waiting, and I'm waiting for my name to be called, and it's taken a little longer than I thought. And it's like starting to dawn on me. I'm at least in the top six. I might be top four, and I can't remember who went. Somebody went, and it kind of dawned on me. I'm like, okay, well, that means I'm at least in the top three. And I kind of had like an internal moment of panic where I was like, son of a bitch. And I was just like, okay, watching people do the bag medley, which actually was going pretty well the last 2 weeks in training. But a sandbag loading event in training compared to game day, like if the bags are different, like there's just so many little things that can affect a loading medley. So I knew that I was just going to have to take it one bag at a time. But it dawns on me I'm at least in the top three, and I was like, oh, okay, all right, well, we're in it now. And Flash looked at me and he was like, just get three. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go for four. And he was like, okay. I'm like, I'm going to make sure I get three, but the goal's four. And he was like, okay. So went out there, got the three. They didn't go as smooth as I wanted. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter, but um, bags weren't in the best shape. But got the third one, grabbed some chalk, went for the fourth bag. As soon as I got the bag in my lap, I heard Paul Mauser say 10 seconds. And normally I try to get really secure and, bring everything in really tight. And I heard the 10 seconds and I was like, I don't have time. So I just stood up, kind of hoisted it to the bar and flipped it over, and it hit the ground basically as the buzzer went. And I just had this like rush of like pride and accomplishment. Not that I didn't think I won the event. I just was like, I worked that whole minute for those four bags and I got it right at the end. So I just had this rush of adrenaline. And then Josh went, and then that's when it dawned on me I was second and going into that event because Josh went after me. And I was like, fuck. So Josh
Yeah.
went,
Right
me and
after the
him,
champ, so right before the champ,
yeah,
so
yeah. So Josh went. Um, he didn't quite get the result he wanted on that event, so he was a little heated. And I did a lap. I had to come down anyway. I come back, I sit down, and Josh had clicked back into being Josh. I don't know if you've met Josh ever, but Josh is probably
yeah.
one of the most genuine, charismatic, intelligent, interesting dudes on the planet. He's awesome. But he had kind of come out of his agitation from the event, and we were sitting together, and he like grabbed my leg and he was like, first place, baby. And I thought he meant him. And I was like, yeah, dude, you're the fucking champ, three years in a row. And he like looked at me, like cocked his head, and then Flash, our coach, we have the same coach, like looked down at me, and I looked up at him, and he was like, no, you're in first. He goes, you won the yoke and the sandbag event.
Nice.
And yeah, and anyone that knows me, not even really well, anyone that knows me knows I'm a pretty emotional dude. And I like it kind of hit me, and I like immediately sort of clinched up. Flash, our coach, was like, not yet. Because he knew I was about to kind of lose it a bit, and I just like recentered. But then Flash was like, I need both of you guys to pack up, go get food, and then go home and get fluids and get an IV. So that was what we did. We packed up, and I actually, like, off the back of me being really emotional, I told Josh, it's like, hey man, if you kind of want to, because we were all staying in the same house together, I was like, hey, if you want some space, like we don't have to go get food, like I'll give you all the space you need. I'm not trying to be in your way today or tomorrow. And he actually got really mad at me and was like, "You're the only person I want to be around. What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Okay," and we like hugged. But that was the end of day one. So yeah,
Yeah, it can be interesting, especially when you got close friends, but you're still competing and stuff.
yeah,
Can be you gotta know where that line is because sometimes people are upset about it or not. But I want to interesting you say like you barely got to train for this contest,
yeah.
right?
Well,
And
I would say we just had to take a very measured, careful approach. Yeah,
yeah, so I've seen this, following the sport and being in it and stuff, where people get hurt and aren't able to go like their full potential in a training leading up to a big contest, and then end up doing better. And I think it just goes to show how much so many of us are overtraining all the time, and like how
yeah,
much, like, especially if you've built it up, like you said, you didn't need to get, you're already at this level. You've been at the Arnold, you've been at OSG, you've been in the finals, you've done all that stuff. Like the events aren't going to be 20% harder than they were at whatever show you did, right?
yeah,
So you're already at that level. You just need to perform once you're
yeah,
there. So I think, just doing a little less to make sure that you can actually perform, that you didn't do that good yoke run 3 weeks ago. You did it on the day because you kept leading up to it is a big
yeah,
thing. Because this happened to me at my first Arnold. I had a hernia doing yoke, got surgery, and like 13 weeks before the Arnold, I had hernia surgery. It was either 13 or 15. Like it's 10 years ago, so it's hard to
yeah,
remember. But it was not. So I literally had like I did like 40% every week leading up, and then like I was only like I would say like you, the last 6 weeks doing like what I'd consider like real weights,
yeah,
and never got close to the contest weight. And I still feel like I didn't win, but it was the best performance at a big contest I ever had. And I feel
yeah.
like that's just from like not killing myself leading up to it.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a few things, but that's something I've actually talked about with people I coach, and then something Flash and I have talked about. Once you get sort of a good baseline of training and experience, like you actually don't need nearly as much exposure to some of this stuff as you think. And I think with the growth of the sport the last few years, we're starting to realize that because better coaching is out there. But we took a very similar approach. Like, well, one, every movement I did leading into this, with the exception of maybe the last 2 or 3 weeks, like Flash left notes, like, you know, if anything hurts, shut it down or like just be very mindful. And like trap bar, well, like with my first day on trap bar, I did like 8 or 10 triples, but at like 45%. You know what I mean? And we just literally next week, one less set, up 5%. And literally just blocked, like built it up. And I think, yeah, like we say it all the time, like more isn't better, better is better. And again, especially if you're experienced. If you're experienced and you have like a backlog of training, it's not so much about skill and like actual strength development. It's getting you to like a peak healthy. Because in my opinion, the healthier you are in a peak, the bigger the peak, the bigger the rebound. And I also think with someone that's a very experienced athlete, just a couple of weeks of good training and then like a slight taper and deload, and then you add the adrenaline and just everything from a contest, like it does put you in a good position to overperform your expectations. And but I know I think like it's a weird mix because you get people that are brand new that they like slack on a bunch of really essential stuff, and then they overdo it in like the worst stuff. And, that's when I talk to people like about coaching and programming, like, hey, like, not everybody necessarily needs a coach, but you do need a program that you follow because more often than not, people are in one of two camps. They either only do the stuff they like or are good at, or they absolutely destroy themselves and they actually don't make that much progress, or some combination of the two.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's what I'm talking about with like doing less is that's a very different conversation than someone that's new and still has to build.
Yeah. Well, the thing is like someone that's new, and this isn't, well, screw it. Most people that are new, the stuff they overdo it on is like the total opposite stuff they need to do it on. Like
We'll do
what
too
you
many
need to
yoke
do is
runs.
too many yoke, too much, like what you need to do is like a bunch of dumbbell, cable, core work, lots of like conditioning and like basically the boring stuff. Like, should you be doing a bunch of cable and dumbbell work the last 2 weeks before a contest? Debatable, but like more than likely that stuff isn't going to be why you're beat up. You know what I mean? It's going to be because you're maxing out your deadlift too often because you're not listening to your coach.
That's probably the number one thing people do is train deadlift too heavy all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
We're all guilty of that at some point.
yeah.
So, how do you feel going into day two?
So luckily, I I felt better than I was expecting, but I definitely felt the onslaught of day one. We had the event change. So we were supposed to have the hoist lift. The hoist lift didn't end up happening for whatever reason, and they switched it to axle clean and press away, um, and which is a pretty good event for me. In general, I'm very good at axle. Press away is not my favorite version, but it's solid for me. Um, but when all of that info was coming in, and I was talking to the people in my circle, like even Josh, I we got the news of the event change, and I felt myself, my mindset sort of shifting, and I was talking to Josh and our friend Raf, who was there uh, as our videographer, but he's also an 80 kilo athlete and a member of Stronger Together, and a formal, and he's been to the Arnold a few times, but we were outside talking, and I was running through everything, and he just said, I don't think you need to change anything. He's like, whatever you're doing mentally, just keep it going. He's like, just you don't need to think tactically, or just do what you're doing. And I just stopped caring. And what I mean by that is I just stopped. I started like planning, like just overthinking. And
Yeah.
he said that, and I just immediately was like, I'm gonna warm up tomorrow, and I'm just gonna clean and press an axle, and that's all I need to worry about right now.
Yeah, just keep pressing it until you can't.
Yeah, pretty
What
much.
else are you gonna
So
do?
yeah, so we were warming up. Axel was feeling good. At this point, I knew I was in first. I didn't know what the reconfigured scores would do.
Who
I
can?
was,
No one knows that
yeah,
math.
no, it's like Interstellar. I was fairly confident that I would stay in first because I had two first places. Um, and going into Sunday, someone like told me like you're still in first. Um, and going into the event, I knew what I should do to maximize my potential on it. And right as I walked onto the main stage, I sort of just didn't do that. I'm someone that's really good at using the clock to my advantage. It's something I call using the minute. And in my head, I was like, the way I can do best at this is two calculated sets. So, and it is something you have to decide in the moment. Like, is it going to be 3 to 5 reps, an intentional drop, take a breath, go again? When I got onto the stage, that plan kind of just went out the window, and I just went for broke. Um, I actually ended up hitting, I didn't realize, a personal PR. I've never hit that many reps on a push jerk on an axle in a row. I hit like six. That
What
actually
was the weight
wasn't a
on
great
it?
245.
Okay.
Um, so for me, push jerk and never having not done that in years, that was good. Um, and was actually a pretty low finish just because a lot of the guys got 7 and 8. Um, but at that point, I was a little agitated at myself for not listening to myself. But that's when some friends of mine were like, "You're still in first. You actually have a really good lead." I didn't know what that meant from a point perspective, and I actually didn't want to know at the time. So
There are two more
we
events after this or one?
won. So there
Okay.
was one event, and I definitely knew, or at least I felt, I was like, if I don't do well in this event, I'm gonna not win. And that was the first moment and the only moment. I think it was right after the axle. Flash was checking on me, and he was like, "You're good." He's like, "You're still in a good spot." And I just said, "I want to win this show." And he was like, "I know, you're doing it." So going in, and it was a max keg for the final event. So me and Josh, we lap the expo together, talking, coming down a bit, and I go to check on. We had some athletes competing in the Masters division, so I went to check on them and whatnot. It starts dawning on Josh and I that it is very likely we are going to have zero warm up equipment, like no sandbags, no kegs, no logs, nothing. So I just started mentally preparing myself to do a keg load for weight with no warm up. And I actually didn't even touch a keg in training. Flash and I decided between the sandbag loading and the log, it was just, he's like, you're already training it. And we
Yeah.
just, it's just like, it just doesn't matter.
And it's a
Um,
simple event. Like keg loading is the easy, like
it
technically
is,
loading out of stones, sandbags, in my opinion.
I would agree with that. Yeah. I would agree with that. And especially if you're doing a contest that has log and sandbags, you're already doing it,
Yeah,
you
that's what
know?
I've tried to tell people too, is they think of these as like separate events, separate movements. And
Yep.
people don't, I mean, obviously now it's a little more, but especially in the beginner level, they don't really think of like a log clean the same as it's the same thing as an Atlas stone.
Yeah.
Like,
And I think that comes with experience and like being a coach and being an athlete and starting to realize like the fundamentals of the sport. Like, oh, a log clean is a loading event.
mhm.
Like, if has limited equipment, like you could have them do log cleans for their loading event in their garage. Like, is it perfect? No, but it's heavy and they have to pull it off the ground onto their chest and stand with it. So,
Yeah. There's semantics where like it's not going to help the pick so much for a stone, but
yeah,
but like it's going to train the triple extension basically.
yeah. And again, like it's all about meeting an athlete where they are. If they don't have kegs, well, it's like you're either going to have them do nothing or you can have them do that.
Yeah.
So,
What's better?
but yeah, so Josh and I realized, okay, we're not going to get any type of a warm up. We could him and haw about it, but there's no point. So Josh and I kind of took a step outside of the backstage area and had like we talked with one another, and hopefully none of the other guys are offended by this, but Josh and I talked, and I was like, we're only getting 3 attempts. It's 25-pound jumps. I said, I think we need to open at 300. And I said, after the 300, I said, I think at least one or two people are going to fall off. And I said, after that, you and I will just duke it out the last two, and then we'll just do our own thing. But I said, how about you and I open at the same weight? And he was like, let's do it. Well, then we go up to James because they were asking for openers, and basically everyone opened at 300, so it didn't really mean anything. But that was our plan going into it. So um, co- absolutely cold. I grabbed the 300 keg, and funny enough, the extension and the load felt great, but the pick off the ground into my lap felt horrible. It felt really bad. It was the first time I've used an actual keg in a while instead of a Bartos keg. Loaded it, and immediately in my head, I was like, I'm going to 325. I'm not jumping to 350. So adrenaline's going. I think one or two guys had fallen off, but me, Quinn, and Josh, it just felt like it was us three. The other guys, they're great, but I kind of felt like it was just us three. And they come up to me and they're like, "What do you want for your next attempt?" And I said 325. And I looked on the thing and it said Quinn, Josh, 325. I'm like, okay, we're all doing 325. Quinn goes, gets it. Josh goes, gets it. I go, I get it. And I got it and it was challenging, but it was the only way I can describe it is you know how when you're warming up and you hit that last heavy single on a log or a deadlift before the attempt, and you just know that you've got the strength and the power. That
Yeah.
was how the 325 felt. I loaded it and it was challenging, but I knew I had more in me, and
It's
I
like a good
like got
primer lift. Like,
yes, I
you're
felt
setting up. I always tell people like when you're going like to try to treat every attempt like it's your last one to gain that confidence going up to your main set where and also you're practicing the movement.
yep,
You see people like they'll like just kind of lazily like just flick like a empty log up. I'm like, no, sit down, do it. So it's this, it's the
yep,
same thing. You get those lifts where it's just flying off of you. You're like, okay, I can do more. It's building
yep.
that confidence.
Yeah, and that's exact. I loaded the 325 and kind of like the sandbag medley. I was just like, "Oh, I'm ready to go. Let's do this." And in my head, I still was like, "I don't know if I can." I didn't know if 375 was even going to come off the ground. So internally, I was like, I should do 350. If anyone goes to 375, and this isn't a knock on Josh or Quinn or anyone else, but I just had a feeling. I was like, I just don't think those two can get 375. So in my head, I was like, I'm just going to do 350 and come what may. But then, like, I'm sort of marching around because I'm hyped up, and very quickly, James was like, "What's your third attempt?" And I like looked at Josh and Quinn, and they were doing their thing, and I had my mouthpiece in, and I was like, "Well, what are they hitting?" And he's like, "They're going for 375." And I was just like, in my head, I was like, if I tie them, I'm almost certain that I win. If I if I get second, I think I lose. So I just took a gamble and was like, all right, well, 375. Quinn went for it. He didn't really get too far with it. Josh got kind of close and actually lost consciousness. So I just was like, okay, let's try and let's end the Arnold on a make like I did last year for my third place finish, and um, got got the 375, which I found out right after would have been a world record. Um, but went to load it and was actually way closer than I thought, and just didn't quite. I wasn't quite close enough, and I looked through the walkway like on the sides of the stage where we walk out of, and Ross Remillard, the coach of Stronger Together, and Josh and I's best friend, and our coach Flash were like, "You did it," and they were like signaling that I had won, and I immediately did like the cutthroat and was like, "Don't tell me that yet." Like let's. So I took a knee and kind of took about 5 seconds to just accept not the placement, but the weekend. I was just like, okay, I feel terrible, but I know I'm not injured. And no matter what happens in the next 5 minutes, this went better than we expected. And then I walked to the side of the stage and kind of just sat down and sorry, getting a little emotional.
It's a big moment.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, the big moment was I'm sitting on the side of the stage, and the Stronger Together social media manager, Kelly, was there, and she was looking at me, giving me thumbs up, and our friend Mary was there, and she was doing the same thing, and Josh walked over and grabbed me and like rubbed me, and he was like, "You just won the Arnold Classic. You're a champion today." And I lost it. I just started like ugly crying, gave him a hug, and I still was like not quite accepting what happened because it just didn't feel real, and it just wasn't what I thought was going to happen. And then that's when James called my name, and I probably took the ugliest photo of all time with James. Like I was like, ah. But and then and after I kind of talked to everybody, I immediately ran across the street to North Market and got some Polish chicken cutlets and mashed potatoes, and then started checking on our masters athletes, and yeah, that was it, man. I mean,
Perfect. Yeah. What's the North Market's the best thing about the Arnold? No one knows. So
so we had so all three coaches from Stronger Together competed last weekend at the Arnold. We also had 2 to 3 athletes each competing, and I took a bunch of check-in calls with our clients leading into the Arnold, and for a lot of them it was their first Arnold. So I was giving them more than like competing advice. I was giving them like Columbus advice. I was like, "This is where do you park? Like, use the Arnold statue as your sort of North Star to get in and out." And then I told her, like, just go to North Market for food. It's like best price and it's like a cool experience. So I love the North Market. Like it reminds me of Reading Terminal Market in Philly and a few other places. I love it. Big fan of North Market.
yeah, that is a good thing. Anyone who's going to Arnold, it's so confusing. There's so much chaos.
Yeah.
I feel like you need to go there 5 times just to kind of like get bearing on everything.
Last year was the first year, so that would have been my fourth. That would have been my fifth Arnold I went to, but my fourth Arnold I competed in. And that was last year was the first year where I truly felt like I knew the lay of the land. And like from a logistical standpoint, so like being able to tell people where to park and like I kept telling everyone like the Arnold, if you're doing strongman, the Arnold statue entrance, that's just base everything off of there. Meet people there, use that as your exit and entrance. Everything you need to know is in that entrance.
I'm
So
telling you, I don't even know if I've ever seen the Arnold statue, honestly. I've been there like 4 times. I'm like, everyone's taking a picture. I'm like, where is that? Like,
yeah, yeah.
but it's a crazy place. So congratulations. That's awesome. Glad you did it. Uh, Looked like it's a fun mix of events.
Yeah.
It and like obviously do like doing a max log, then a max like heavy max rep deadlift into like a 120 foot yoke is very brutal. So I understand how
Yeah.
people do that. Um, but yeah, that sounds fun. Just we'll go quickly over stuff like what is like your background as far as like you grew up, like what made you start to, from where you grew up into like how you got into sports and then lifting.
Yeah, so I actually don't have a background in sports. So I had a very chaotic, dysfunctional childhood. So any free time I had was mostly spent um, kind of just being like a latchkey kid. You know, we moved around so much. Like it was very normal for me to move in the middle of a school year and like kind of be displaced and not be able to join any sports team. So it just was never part of my thing really as a kid. I played a lot of music and I was pretty solitary until I was about 13. But I don't have a sports background. I was mostly into music and art. And then when I started tattooing at about 23 or 24, I was really unhealthy and I kind of just got peer pressured into working out, and I got really into working out, and I lost a bunch of weight and got really fit, and that just progressed into kind of doing like aggressive bodybuilding. You know, like I would do squat, bench, and deadlift, but then I would just do like a bunch of cable and dumbbell work, and then that's when I started to become aware of you and CrossFit. And I remember in February of 2014, I was living in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was working out with my friend Talia, who was a strong woman back in the day.
Hmm.
Little Miss Iron Miss. I don't know if anyone remembers her, but we were working out, and I tattooed her, and she invited me to go do a log workout with her. And I was kind of just like, I don't know if I want to do CrossFit or strongman. She's like, well, I think you'd like strongman, but I can't remember what I said, but I think I talked about like community. And she was like, go do CrossFit. And so I signed up, I did CrossFit and fell in love with it. And I got into it to compete. Um, and then I went hard at CrossFit for about 2.5 years. And it just kind of dawned on me that I wasn't going to get where I wanted. I also wasn't having fun. And we moved to North Carolina, Raleigh area, Durham specifically, where Spider Strength, James, and all those folks are. And I saw that they were doing the NC Strength Challenge in like September 2016 and signed up, and I got a coach who was my coach until last year. His name is Will Hall. But I did that first show, and I loved the event, but I loved the training because it was a little bit of everything I liked. I like being really fit and in shape, but I also like lifting heavy and pushing myself. And then I like accessory work. Like I like dumbbell work, and I just love training in general. And that is my sports background. I just don't really have one. So I will say my old coach, Will, um, without telling me, seemed to have some ideas as to my potential, but also knew what I needed to work on. And I'm a very compliant client in terms of like sticking to a program. And he just, in retrospect, now almost 10 years later, he basically had me, doing lifting and strongman and all that. But he basically was having me do a lot of like very basic athletic stuff, just like balance work and just learning how to move my body in an efficient manner.
Hmm. Trying to
Yeah.
make you into an athlete.
Yeah. Well, he did strongman, um, but was primarily a weightlifter. So
Sure.
there was a lot of, in retrospect, a lot of like off-season weightlifting type work. A lot of power development, a lot of bounding and things like that.
Right on. A little more dynamic than the
There,
average
yes,
ones.
yeah. I mean, I like to tell people this. The first 6 months I trained with him, I had to do a 20-minute row test, and then I did a banded strict handstand push-up workout mixed with like broad jumps and like unweighted single leg RDLs. So just like a lot of weird stuff.
Did he do grid like when there was the grid league
It-
for a while?
yes,
I met him.
he, you did at the
Yeah,
San
that's right.
Francisco Combine.
Yeah.
Yep. Yes, you
Well,
did.
on the combine, I went up and like did like a workshop to try to lift those
Yeah.
silly balls or something.
Yep.
That was kind of a mess, but he was like the only cool person there, if I remember right. Like I was
Yeah,
like, that guy's
exactly.
cool, and he was actually like interested in it. And then you had like all these like famous CrossFit people that were divas, and they just went in the corner. I was like, why am I here? But
Yeah.
anyways,
Yeah, no,
yeah,
Will's a great dude. We worked together until last April.
strong
Uh
dude.
Strong. Oh my God. I think he had like a 360 or 370 thruster from the
Yeah,
ground.
he's a dynamic.
Insane.
He's strong. That's what I always said when I was competing in strongman. It was like the 80 kilo class was kind of new, and I don't know if it was a fault of mine, but I always looked at it as like, all right, I want to try to get good at this while I can, because
Yeah.
I know that there's people out there that are better than me. You know what I mean? Like there's a better
Yeah.
talent pool out there. And I look at people like him, like they could have just, done this well. Like I'd go like while I was competing and like meet someone like that. I'm like, you could just come in here and do whatever you wanted if you wanted to. He's a little bigger, but yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I think
that
even, go ahead.
no, that's it.
Yeah. He was so good at so many things that I think if he put the effort if he put 75% of the effort that he put into weightlifting and CrossFit into strongman, like I know him so well as an athlete and a person. I know the things he wouldn't have been super great at without a shit ton of work, he would have still skyrocketed to a national, international level pretty quickly because of how good he was at everything else.
Yeah, a little bit
Um,
of specialization.
yeah, but dude, he's param. I mean, him and I, we blew way past the coach client relationship. Like he is one of my still to this day one of my most trusted friends. Like he was texting me all weekend for the Arnold. He called me Tuesday after the Arnold, and I'm gonna get emotional again. He wanted me to tell him he's like, tell me everything that happened. I want to hear it from you. And I remember we closed the phone call out, and he was like, you were a great guy 10 days ago. You're a great guy today, and you were a great guy when we met ten years ago. And that's why I knew this was going to happen. And I like lost it. But no, he was a animal.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What do you think like as far as future for the sport, as far as but let's just focus on the 80 kilo lightweight class. What do you see going forward? And for someone, I don't pay as much attention as I used to. So like
Yeah.
who are like couple guys coming up, younger guys
Yeah.
getting into it that like you think people should look out for?
I mean, I think we're about to enter into this very interesting era for the next, I would say, 1 to 3 years, where I think the guys that have got a good amount of experience but are still really healthy. So, I mean, Josh Kalewski, I mean, I think
It's a
Josh
rare
is about,
combination.
yeah, it is. It really is. I think Josh um is about to enter into like his like God of War mode. And what I mean by that is um somebody like Josh that other than like very tiny little things that are basically gonna like little not even say weaknesses, just little technical things or little tiny things that they can shore up in like a 2 month off season cycle. Like those guys are, I think Josh is about to hit like what I would call like a run, like with Nick Canby a couple of years ago. I think Josh, and he's been on it. I mean, he's got two Arnolds in a row, two Arnold wins in a row, multiple Arnold podiums in a row, and he's podiumed at OSG 2 years in a row. I think he's about to hit a good stride, and I think he's going to be unbeatable. Um, and then I think we're going to have guys, he's been around for a couple years now, but like Ricky Panganaban, even though he's been in medical school, he won in 21. I think
Mhm.
Ricky is about to, if he comes back, which I think he's still training really hard. But when Ricky comes back, um, he has really easy weight cuts. He's a great guy. He has a great head on his shoulders, like Josh. And I think like the guys like him are going to be in a position to just slay. My friend Connor from the UK, who's also an MST athlete coached by Flash, he just won Britain's Strongest, like their nationals as an 80, and I think he's going to run house here really soon. But as far as like the weight class on the whole, I think we're finally seeing this sort of amalgamation of these like not just like oh a really good power lifter switch to strongman or a weightlifter. We're seeing people that from the get-go are starting to implement all those little things out the gate into their training from the get-go, and they're just doing it for strongman. That's something that like Shane and MST and I talk about a lot is the best strongman athletes, regardless of weight class, but especially the 80 kilo weight class, they're going to have a really good baseline familiarization with Olympic lifting. They're going to have a really good, solid, just sheer static strength base. And then they're also going to have like this ridiculous power endurance, So what I like to tell people is you've got to pull like a power, you got to deadlift like a power lifter. You have to press like a weightlifter. You have to have the like power output endurance of a linebacker, and then you've got to do accessory work like a bodybuilder. Um, and just setting that strong baseline so that you can meet the demands of the sport.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers the question.
No, yeah, that sounds good. And Josh, he had a baby recently, right? So,
Yeah, they had their second baby
okay.
right before OSG, and that she was born early, and she was in the NICU.
Yeah,
So
so
he was managing,
that's a
helping.
lot to deal with.
And also, I know, he still, you know, he wanted to win, and obviously, but like if you look at the metrics of what he did that weekend compared to the year prior,
Still improved.
improved
Hmm.
massively, you know.
I don't even know how it's possible. I have a 6-year-old still, and I'm like, I don't know how anyone could compete like this.
Dude, him and everyone that's like, I mean, Josh is not
So I'm
a
like, I'm
coach.
far out of the
Yeah,
newborn phase, and it's just like
yeah,
I don't get how
dude.
anyone could do it.
Yeah, Josh is not like coached or a coach for Stronger Together, but
Sure.
he's one of our best friends, and he's like coached by our coach. But Josh, Ross, and Andrew, all those guys, the relationships they have with their partners and wives is awesome. Josh and Amanda are like, one, they're like the most beautiful couple on the planet, and then two, they're both just absolute rock star humans. So I think seeing someone like Josh do well is really great because he's such a good guy as well. Um, and that just to me makes it even better when he succeeds because I know that he's such a great guy.
Yeah, of course. Why do you think it is? Because you keep mentioning all these names with the 80 kilos that at this point, because I remember when I was trying to start and get like stuff established with starting strongman and like online coaching, which like was I think like Clinton Darden was doing it, and that's
Yeah,
like it back then. Like maybe Mike Westerling a little bit. Like there was like three
yeah,
people. Like there'd people like they'd like send like a program over to their friends or something like a little bit, but like there was 2012-ish 11, like there was not really, it wasn't an industry where now it's like an accepted thing. Like it was almost like they people acted like if you're offering online coaching back then, you were ripping people off. That's like
yeah,
that was like the mentality, which is ridiculous.
yeah.
And like, I had so many people ask like, how can you have like a lightweight coach you and stuff? And now today you look at it and like how many of like these top coaches came from the 80 kilo class? It's kind of wild. Like, you have
Yeah,
you and everyone that's at Stronger Together. You have Shane, Jermaine, which of course I competed with at the Arnold and stuff back
yeah.
in the day with MST and everything they're doing. Like everyone, like there's, these are good quality coaching. From I have my theories on it, but why do you think?
Man, this is going to be a bit of a hot take. It might offend some people. I don't mean
Do
for
it.
it
Yeah,
to, but
it's an hour
yeah,
in. But I'll clip it
yeah,
to make everyone mad.
yeah. So my honest answer is to be a really good 80 or 90 kilo athlete, and even 105. Um, the demand put on us at the high level, I think, is far greater for the most part than the other weight classes, barring the absolute tip top of the Open Pro Men at World Strongest Man and at the Rogue Arnold Classic. I think like the static strength demand, the power demand, the technical demand, it is far greater with the 80s and 90s especially. And that is true across every strength sport. As an athlete gets bigger, more often than not, efficiency goes down. So I think what's happened is you've got smaller athletes that had to start thinking outside of the cultural norms that pretty much all came down from the open men. Now, some of those principles are I mean, a lot of it was kind of just like powerlifting progressions swapped out with strongman implements, and then you would do events on a Saturday. That template can get someone a really long way if they just follow a very basic linear progression with deloads and stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with that. But again, to that point we were talking about earlier, guys that competed at a high level as lightweights, I think especially Shane and Tom Winning, me, Ross, all like we've all started to see that like to do really well as a smaller weight class athlete, you have to have a huge toolbox to pull from because the outliers in the sport, I think, are just vastly the outliers are more drastic. So someone that's a fast 80 is a they're not a fast strongman, they're a fast human. And if someone's a really good puller that's an 80, they probably are like maybe one of they easily could go back to powerlifting and probably compete at near an international level. And I think that the culture in the bigger weight classes just benefited from just being really big, if I'm being totally honest. But now, I think, especially the last few years, with the onset of guys like Martins and the Stoltmans, and to me, Mitch Hooper embodies the sort of freakness of what's
Novikov
coming.
too.
Novikov, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
They're fast, they're
that kind of
dynamic.
model.
Yeah, because like we saw the era of Eddie, Brian,
Thor.
Z, and Thor that like they obviously were
Get bigger,
fast.
get bigger, get bigger, get bigger.
Yes, yes. But what happened? Like the genetic pool, like there's no way anyone's going to get taller than those guys. Like if they do, they're not going to be able to compete because they'll have something wrong with them. But so what happened? The athletes that maybe weren't as big, they got more skilled and stronger, and they caught up to the monster freaks. Now, obviously, Mitch, I think, is a combination of both. He is very big, but he's also very fast, very technically efficient. Um, but I think you could boil it down to like being a high level 80 for the most part is just vastly more demanding compared to the other weight classes, and we have to have more skills.
Yeah, that's what I always said is it's like you kind of you're forced to figure it out a different way.
Yep.
And I was
And
training with these guys. All of my training partners were 6'6" when I was training, and
yep.
like I think it messed me up in a lot of ways because I was trying to like keep up with them. Like we do a yoke and like sit down for 40 minutes and do another thing like you
Yeah.
know uh and I would try to like match their weights and it just wrecked my body, which is silly,
Yeah.
but like you realize like yeah, you can't rely like the same way they're like, oh well, just like put it on your belly and like walk like I don't have the counterbalance. I'm not 150 kilos, even at that that level. Like I'm not, especially training with Oberst, it's like he could just do stuff. Like his body,
Yeah.
like he was 300 something pounds in high school, like 350
Yeah.
pounds in high school, same size. Like he was just meant to pick up stuff. I
Yeah.
was not meant to pick up stuff. You have to make yourself be able to pick up stuff. Obviously, you still train to do that, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's just you can't rely on eating more food, getting bigger. 'Cause that's one of the ways as a heavyweight that helped that people that like helped for a while is like if I just eat, I can keep getting bigger. I can stay in this like anabolic state
Yeah.
and just get bigger. Like that's basically what Brian did. He's a very methodical lifter too, but like
Yeah.
he never stopped growing for like 20 years. Like
No. Yeah. And like, I mean, again, at the very top of the men's open, guys like Brian and all the like, we've kind of come full circle where
yeah.
like World's Strongest Man, the TV show, is a brutal event to do. There's like so many events. It's really long. You're outside a lot of times in the heat. Like that's brutal. And then the Arnold Classic is just I mean, the Arnold Classic's what took Z out of the sport, as far as I'm concerned, when they
Yeah,
had
with
the
the
Bale
bell
Toad
toe.
that year. Yeah.
Hmm.
So,
A lot of people out of
but
the sport.
yeah. So, and yeah, like I mean, quite frankly, the Arnold this year for us, the Pro Am, if you were to look at the weight matrix from like the 80 kilo and then go up, uh, here we go. For the yoke event for the 80s, it was 700 for 120 feet. For the 90s, it was only 750. Still hard, but I think it's like disproportionately not as challenging. And then another example is for the 105s, the loading bag medley for them ended at 3:30. The loading medley for us ended at 3:20.
It's
So
almost you know, what it's like it's like a meaningless jump. Like it's, percentage
yeah,
wise, it's a
yeah.
percent
Well,
or
this
two.
it's stimulus. Like the stimulus of the loading medley for us was quantifiably different as the weight classes got bigger. Now, I don't have a problem with that. I know that there's very justified reasoning for that, but the reality is like especially for the 80s, like those examples are like that takes a toll on us.
Yeah, totally. But I really appreciate talking today. Can find
Yeah.
everything that you do at what, strongertogether.com, or is it
Yeah,
stronger slash?
so it's the Stronger Together, and then it's strongertogether.co, and then my Instagram is strongest tattooer. If anyone wants anything at all from us, either coaching, nutrition, prep programs, we also do consults, like paid consults, to where you hit us up ahead of time and you give us questions, and on the calls we give you actionable items to do for the things you're hitting us up for. So yeah.
Awesome, yes. And you got your United States Nationals program going out. I just saw, which
Yeah, we just put
is
out the
awesome.
USS Nationals Prep Program. We've had a lot of success with that in the years. We're actually planning on being there as a team. We've got a lot of people competing at it. We're not going to have like a booth or anything, but I'll the plan is for me and a few of us to be there handling our athletes and providing support and just having a good time.
That's awesome. I'm glad to see people like you and good people doing good things in the sport. It's been great talking to you today, and wish you luck in with Stronger Together and everything you do as an athlete moving forward.
Thanks, man. I appreciate everything you've done for the sport.